Have you ever noticed that the kinder you are, the less people respect you? It sounds wrong to say this, I know. Since you were little, you've been taught that kindness attracts kindness, that good returns, that all you have to do is do your part for the world to recognize your worth. But that never happened, did it? In fact, the more you give in, the more they push you away. The more you understand, the more they use you. The more you try to be the best you can be, the more invisible you feel. And there's a brutal reason for that, a reason no one dares to tell you. Predictable kindness is perceived as weakness. Regardless of your intentions, your heart, or your good deeds, politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that people respond not to what you feel, but to what you allow. And this is where Machiavelli comes in as a weapon that few dare to wield. Centuries ago, he revealed a code that the powerful still use today to dominate environments, relationships, and opportunities without raising their voices. A code that transforms ordinary people into silent strategists. A code that explains why those who try to be loved end up ignored, and those who learn to be respected dominate the arena. What if I told you there's a set of brutal rules, hidden, forbidden, uncomfortable, that when applied completely change how the world reacts to you? Rules that automatically remove you from the position of target and place you in the position of someone impossible to manipulate. If something inside you is tired of pleasing others, tired of giving in, tired of being underestimated, then you're in the right place. Because today, you're going to understand why boundless kindness is a sentence of submission, and how to turn the tables without losing your humanity, only gaining strategy. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. When he finally realizes that the world doesn't function like a court of law, everything changes. He discovers that the idealized scenario of being good, working hard, and expecting recognition is nothing more than a comfortable myth created to keep many people too predictable. What exists, in practice, is an arena, noisy, chaotic, and guided by real human nature, just as Machiavelli described when observing that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, is the only reliable map for those who want to survive. And in this arena, it's not the most talented who wins, but those who have learned to use their minds as weapons, applying virtù and fortuna wisely. He sees that less prepared people prosper simply because they understand the invisible game of influence, while many still believe that the appearance of virtue is enough. The truth that few accept is that the end justifies the means when the game is one of strategic survival, and denying this is like entering a war barefoot. The only rule here is clear. Those who do not understand the calculated use of force become prey, and while most people try to be loved, he begins to realize that perhaps it's better to be feared than loved. And this realization opens a door he doesn't yet know how to name, but he will learn in the next step. He begins to notice a curious pattern. He always admired people who seemed naturally successful, but never understood why they achieved so much with so little. The answer now appears like a silent slap. They mastered the game of influence. It wasn't luck, it wasn't privilege, it was calculation. It was the ability to perceive nuances that most ignore, such as reading others' motivations, controlling one's own posture, and the strategy of shaping perceptions before others shape them for him. Machiavelli warned, decisions based on real human nature always trump good intentions. And when he begins to observe colleagues, leaders, and even historical figures, the penny finally drops. Those who dominate the arena understand that their own loyal armies are not made of soldiers, but of mental alliances. That being predictable is the same as handing the treasure map to the enemy, and that constant adaptability is more valuable than any fixed personality trait. He realizes for the first time that there is a secret manual operating in the background, a manual he never received. And then comes the most uncomfortable revelation. He realizes he never lost for lack of kindness, charisma, or intelligence. He lost because he entered battles believing they were fair debates when they were silent disputes. It's like arriving at a sword fight carrying flowers, believing someone will notice your effort and protect you. The arena doesn't work that way. Here, those who understand influence create an advantage. Those who expect recognition create frustration. That's why so many ordinary people seem to advance as if they know something others ignore. They've learned to move with calculation, to use their minds as strategic tools, to recognize that virtue and fortuna favor those who take a stand, not those who hesitate. He begins to realize that to stop being a spectator and become a player, he will need to reconsider everything he's been taught about merit, justice, and ideal behavior. And when that realization sets in, the question that changes everything is born. What exactly programmed us to be so weak in this game? From a young age, he was trained to follow rules that no one else follows. That old idea of waiting your turn, being patient, not causing trouble, seemed noble when he was a child, but now it sounds like an invisible straitjacket. Growing up, everyone repeated that all it takes is hard work for things to happen, completely ignoring what Machiavelli had already pointed out. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, is what determines who advances. And the reality is that whoever takes, conquers. Whoever waits loses ground. Naivete, disguised as virtue, has turned many people into easy targets for opportunists. And because they don't understand the invisible game of influence, they continue to believe that the appearance of virtue is enough to guarantee respect. When he realizes this, the feeling is bitter, like discovering that he studied for the wrong test his whole life. And the worst part? The system was built for this. To generate predictability. Being predictable is dangerous because it makes anyone manipulable. And if the end justifies the means for those who want power, imagine for those who want to control you. This question is starting to dig into something deeper. He begins to compare his behavior to that of people who truly master their own lives. They don't wait for recognition. They demand a stance. They don't seek permission. They take initiative. While he tries to be loved, they are content to be respected because they have already understood that often it is better to be feared than loved, as long as they know how to avoid being hated. This is the difference between those who follow rules that don't exist and those who use the real rules of the game. And when he tries to act more firmly, he notices that his own beliefs hinder his movements, as if an inner voice whispered, "Be careful, they'll think you're arrogant." But this voice is not his. It's the programming. It's a social script reproduced generation after generation, precisely to prevent people from developing a calculated use of force or decisions based on real human nature. And without realizing it, he has spent years living as if there were a moral policeman watching his every move. When he realizes that this policeman doesn't exist, everything inside him begins to change. And this change brings him closer to an older understanding. Predictability is the greatest weakness of those conditioned to be too good. He realizes that his naivete was seen by others not as a virtue, but as a strategic opening. Opportunistic people don't attack the strong, they attack the predictable. And, living trapped in the anxiety of appearing perfect, he never developed constant adaptability, which is one of the greatest weapons a strategist can have. Machiavelli already said that your own loyal armies are those you build from your own attitude, not from promises. And he never built those armies. He always relied on the illusion of external recognition, as if one day someone would pat him on the shoulder and say, "Now you deserve it." But the world doesn't work that way. Recognition isn't given, it's taken. And when this truth begins to tear apart the old programming within him, he feels something curious. Not anger, but liberation. A feeling that there's a hidden code that's always been there, but that no one taught him. And this code was revealed centuries ago by the man who saw the human soul with more precision than anyone else. When he finally encounters Machiavelli, not as a textbook villain, but as a brilliant analyst of real human nature, he realizes he was reading the world through the wrong lens. Machiavelli never taught wickedness, he taught survival. He showed that politics guided by reality, not ideals, is the key to understanding why good men are forgotten while the ruthless rule. And here, ruthless doesn't mean cruel, but strategic. He understands that controlling the human mind is far more powerful than controlling physical armies, because physical armies rebel, but well-formed perceptions obey. Machiavelli understood that virtù and fortuna favor those who act, not those who wait. He taught that the appearance of virtue can be as useful as real virtue, provided it is used with calculated use of force and without becoming hated. The more he reads, the more he realizes there is a hidden code guiding all forms of power. A code that few see because they prefer to believe that the world rewards good intentions. And when that code enters his mind, something begins to awaken. He begins to look at his own past and feels a mixture of guilt and relief. Guilt for having ignored for so long what was right before his eyes. Relief for finally understanding. Machiavelli made it clear that decisions based on real human nature always prevail over those based on idealistic morality. He sees that strong leaders have always acted with surgical precision, while weak leaders acted hoping to please. And he realizes how the principle "better to be feared than loved," provided one avoids being hated, is not about intimidation, but about establishing presence. Strategic presence. He remembers situations in which he lost respect for always trying to be understanding, for over-explaining himself, for asking permission even to exist. Now he understands that influence is born from posture, not justifications. If before he saw Machiavelli as a distant author, now he sees him as a silent mentor. And it's impossible not to notice. Men who dominate environments follow exactly this code, even without knowing that it comes from centuries ago. The more he studies, the more he realizes that the Machiavellian code isn't evil. It's mathematical. It reveals patterns that have always existed. Whoever controls the narrative governs. Whoever shows weakness awakens predators. Whoever acts with conviction creates followers. Whoever hesitates creates enemies. He understands how loyal armies aren't formed with inspiring speeches, but with firm actions repeated over time. And he understands that constant adaptability is what separates the players from the pawns. While many stumble trying to be 100% good, silent strategists understand that the end justifies the means when the end is surviving the power game. And that's where the great turning point comes. He sees that all the suffering, rejection, and invisibility he experienced weren't the work of fate, but of a lack of psychological strategy. Reading Machiavelli becomes a mirror, and in that mirror, he sees himself not as a victim, but as someone about to awaken to a new kind of presence, the presence that transforms the invisible into the dangerous. He spends years believing that effort speaks for itself, that working hard, being polite, helping others, and acting with an appearance of virtue would be enough for the world to finally say, "Now you're ready." But that day never comes. He observes less prepared, less dedicated, even less committed people achieving opportunities that always seem to slip through their fingers. And only then does he realize what Machiavelli tried to warn centuries ago. Merit matters, but it doesn't rule. What rules is presence, its influence. It's the ability to see that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, always wins. When this realization hits him, he feels a mixture of frustration and enlightenment. He wasn't invisible for lack of talent, he was invisible for lack of strategy, for not understanding virtu and fortuna, for not applying the calculated use of force. And, for the first time, he understands that it's not enough to be good. It's necessary to be perceived as someone impossible to ignore. This awakening doesn't happen like a dramatic bolt from the sky. It happens on an ordinary afternoon when he realizes that no one protected him for being kind, no one promoted him for being dedicated, and no one defended him for being fair. The reality is harsher. Those who live waiting for recognition end up subjugated. And he remembers simple, everyday situations, being passed over at work, having his ideas stolen in meetings, being ignored when trying to lead something, and it all fits together like a perverse puzzle. He understands that decisions based on real human nature are more effective than following rules that no one respects. He realizes that avoiding being hated doesn't mean being passive, it means being strategic, and that being loved might massage the ego, but rarely builds one's own loyal armies. At that moment, he sees that there's a fine line between being good and being manipulable, and that he's spent years on the wrong side of that line. But now the game changes. The real turning point happens when he makes a silent pact with himself. "I refuse to be manipulated." This phrase, uttered almost in a whisper, changes his entire demeanor. He begins to observe more than he speaks. He starts responding less and analyzing more. He begins to understand that the end justifies the means when the means is to recover his own dignity. And this change is not accompanied by anger. It is accompanied by clarity. He realizes that constant adaptability is not about pleasing others, but about positioning himself as someone who knows how to reinvent himself without losing firmness. He stops acting to be accepted and starts acting to be respected. This transition is subtle, but powerful. He begins to feel something new: presence. That silent presence that makes people pay attention without him asking. And little does he know that all this will lead him to face an uncomfortable truth. A truth that dismantles much of the illusions he has carried his entire life about morality and balance. He grows up believing that justice is a kind of universal law that balances everything in the end, as if there were some kind of invisible judge noting merits, punishing bad behavior, and rewarding those who do everything right. But Machiavelli had already warned, politics guided by reality, not by ideals, is what commands the real world. And in reality, justice is a collective fiction created to make people easier to control. A beautiful story told so that no one questions why the efforts of many never translate into results. When he realizes this, he understands that depending on justice to survive is as naive as entering a battlefield unarmed, believing that the enemies will follow the rules of the game. Nobody does, nor should he expect them to. The end justifies the means for those who want power, and unfortunately, this phrase describes how many act, even without admitting it. And while he follows the playbook of idealized justice, others use justice as a manipulable tool. It is this clash that begins to shatter the illusions that kept him weak. He begins to notice concrete examples in his own life. Colleagues who promised reciprocity and disappeared when it came time to help. People who benefited from his kindness without ever returning it. Relationships that demanded infinite understanding but offered crumbs. He realizes that being fair to the unjust is entering a game where only one side plays armed. Machiavelli stated that decisions based on real human nature always prevail over moralistic expectations. And real human nature shows that reciprocity is rare, not the rule. Many only respond when there is presence, posture, or direct interest. Avoiding being hated is not the same as being exploited, and for years he confused the two. He expects justice from the unjust, consistency from the inconsistent, loyalty from the opportunist. It's like expecting a wolf to respect the sheep's code of honor. This understanding doesn't make him colder, it makes him more lucid. He begins to notice how virtù and fortuna favor those who act with calculated use of emotional force, not those who offer unlimited kindness without filter. When the illusion of justice crumbles, he doesn't become cynical, he becomes realistic. He understands that the world doesn't punish the naive, it only consumes them. And he begins to mentally review past situations. Moments when he expected recognition, conversations where he retreated to avoid problems, situations where he sacrificed himself, believing the universe would reciprocate later. Nothing came back. Not because of the universe's malice, but because reciprocity isn't an automatic mechanism, it's a strategic construction. One's own loyal armies don't arise from good intentions, but from positioning. And he realizes that to survive in the arena, he needs to abandon the childish idea that the world owes someone something. The world doesn't give, the world allows. And only constant adaptability makes it possible to occupy previously inaccessible spaces. This internal rupture opens space for a new understanding, an understanding that Machiavelli recorded with surgical precision and that he is now ready to apply. He begins to realize that Machiavelli wasn't just writing about politics, he was writing about human psychology. When Machiavelli states that men must either be flattered or destroyed, he isn't advocating cruelty. He's explaining how the mind works in the face of threat and reward. People react much more strongly to complete decisions than to minor corrections. A slight offense creates a lasting enemy, while a firm decision ends resistance. Politics, guided by reality, not ideals, recognizes that human beings dislike ambiguity. Therefore, the calculated use of force works better than timid action. He realizes how many times he erred by trying to be kind, offering half measures that only fueled the insolence of others. Machiavelli teaches that avoiding being hated doesn't mean being weak, but rather being clear. Clarity cuts, defines, and educates. And the more he understands this, the more he begins to see patterns in his personal and professional relationships. It's as if someone had turned on the light in a hallway where he had previously been groping his way through. He recalls situations where he tried to resolve conflicts in a polite way, offering gentle answers, hoping to be understood. And all he received in return was more disrespect. This is because half measures send the wrong message. They show hesitation. And hesitation, from a psychological point of view, awakens predators. Machiavelli knew this when he recommended decisions based on real human nature, not on how we would like people to be. He begins to analyze figures of power he admires and realizes that they all have something in common. They don't leave important matters unresolved. They finalize, they close, they don't offer loopholes. It's virtù applied with precision. And he understands that this firmness doesn't create enemies, it creates boundaries. When there are clear boundaries, even those who dislike you respect them. The absence of clarity, on the other hand, generates chaos. He realizes that many of his problems came precisely from not marking psychological territory. The lack of completeness invited invasions, and now that changes. The most curious thing is that in studying these lessons, he realizes that much of the emotional suffering he experienced could have been avoided with firm decisions at the right time. He remembers relationships that dragged on because he didn't want to seem tough, friendships that consumed him because he avoided confrontation, colleagues who encroached on his space because he always offered another chance. Machiavelli calls this the error of half measures, and he finally understands why. Half measures create an illusion of power for those who shouldn't have it. Complete decisions create structure, and structure generates respect. He realizes that having one's own loyal armies begins with the ability to eliminate doubts and take a stand without trembling, and that constant adaptability is not gentleness, but intelligence adjusted to the context. He begins to see that applying these lessons will not make him cold, it will make him whole. And when this understanding sets in, he inevitably moves towards the question that few dare to face. What, after all, does it mean to be strategically ruthless? He always believed that ruthlessness was synonymous with cruelty, that ruthless people were those who were explosive, aggressive, or emotionally uncontrolled. But when he reads Machiavelli carefully, he realizes that the definition is completely different. Ruthlessness, in the strategic sense, is coldness, not insensitivity. It is calculation, not brutality. Machiavelli describes ruthlessness as the ability to act without letting clouded emotions delay important decisions. It is understanding that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands precision, and that the calculated use of force is more effective than uncontrolled force. He realizes that emotions are data, not commands. Anger is not for exploding, it is for analyzing. Fear is not for paralyzing, it is for guiding movements. And this makes him see his own life with different eyes. He realizes how much suffering could have been avoided if he had applied this emotional sophistication. True ruthlessness is silent, elegant, and above all, conscious. He begins to observe people who fear conflict and realizes that they confuse kindness with inaction. A simple example: when someone disrespects him repeatedly, he reacts with long conversations, explanations, and justifications. And the result? Nothing changes. This is because half measures strengthen inappropriate behavior. Machiavelli's strategic ruthlessness suggests the opposite: complete decisions and firm stances. It's not about shouting, humiliating, or retaliating. It's about setting unequivocal limits. It's about applying a clear action that eliminates doubt and prevents recurrence. He realizes that avoiding being hated doesn't mean avoiding firmness. It means avoiding gratuitous humiliation, and that being feared respectfully often generates healthier relationships than trying to be loved by everyone. This realization brings unexpected relief. He realizes that he can be firm without being hostile, that he can be respected without being aggressive, that he can act without apologizing for existing. Sophisticated ruthlessness demands a skill few master, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent, knowing when to act and when to observe. It is virtue applied to everyday behavior. He begins to practice small exercises, such as responding with few words in tense situations, maintaining an upright posture when confronted, or simply not justifying personal decisions. These details create presence and show that he is learning to make decisions based on real human nature, not on the childish desire to be understood. He realizes that feelings don't need to be expelled, only organized. And that constant adaptability means adjusting his posture without losing his essence. Little by little, he ceases to be predictable. He becomes intriguing. He becomes someone whose reaction cannot be easily read, and that is where true respect is born. And this new form of presence begins to shape his response to humiliations, attacks, and provocations that previously destabilized him deeply. He always believed that, faced with humiliation or attack, there were only two possible responses: react immediately or swallow the situation. But by studying Machiavelli, he discovers that there is a third way, infinitely more powerful: the chosen response. Unlike the impulsive reaction, born from a wounded ego, and the silent submission, born from fear, the chosen response is born from strategy. It is when he decides how to respond, when to respond, and whether to respond at all. This is where politics guided by reality, not by ideals, comes to life. The chosen response ignores romantic morality and considers only the psychological impact. He realizes that ignoring can be as powerful as confronting, as long as it is done intentionally. And that responding coldly, without raising one's voice, sometimes dismantles the aggressor more than any emotional outburst. Machiavelli said that injuries should be inflicted at once, and this phrase reveals something profound. Intensity triumphs over repetition. He discovers that no weapon is more lethal than the right silence at the right time. He decides to test this principle in the real world. The next time someone tries to provoke him in a meeting, he doesn't retaliate. He doesn't justify himself. He simply looks, smiles slightly, and asks a simple question: "And what solution do you suggest?" This question dismantles the provocateur because it shifts the focus of the attack to responsibility. It's a calculated use of force, applied with elegance. In another situation, when someone tries to ridicule him in public, he doesn't respond with aggression. He responds with objectivity. Interesting. Now that you're finished, let's get to the main point. Firm, but not hostile. Machiavelli would be proud. He understands how such attitudes shape perceptions. They make him unpredictable, and unpredictability creates respect. He understands that decisions based on real human nature show that people always expect emotional reactions, and it's precisely when you don't deliver that they lose control. The chosen response becomes his invisible weapon, his silent virtue. Over time, he realizes that choosing his responses is a way of shaping his own narrative. He stops being someone who explodes, or someone who endures everything, and becomes someone who decides. And this decision changes everything around him. He gains his own loyal armies, not by dominating others, but by dominating himself. He becomes more selective with his words, more careful with his gestures, more attentive to the details that reveal strength without needing to demonstrate it. Constant adaptability is now not just a concept, it's daily practice. He learns that not every attack deserves a response, not every mistake deserves an explanation, not every provocation deserves energy. The chosen response transforms him into someone who economizes movement but maximizes impact. And this posture opens space for the great transition that few manage to make. The shift from wanting to be liked to wanting to be respected, something that will completely change how he positions himself in the world. He spent much of his life trying to be liked. He did favors, gave up space, avoided conflict, smiled even when he didn't want to, all to avoid disappointing anyone. But the more he tried to be liked, the less he was respected. And this is where Machiavelli comes in like a wake-up call. It is better to be feared than loved, provided one avoids being hated. This phrase, so often misunderstood, is not about violence. It's about presence. It's about the ability to establish clear boundaries. It's about politics guided by reality, not ideals. He realizes that being liked was never a problem. until he became dependent on it. The transition begins when he understands that respect is born from unpredictability and the ability to set limits. Predictable kindness becomes weakness, unbounded gentleness becomes submission, and the more he tries to be loved, the more he loses himself. This revelation changes his inner posture, and this posture changes everything externally. He begins to practice small changes. When someone makes an absurd request, instead of making excuses, he simply replies, "I can't." No justifications, no drama, no additional details. The silence after that phrase becomes more powerful than any sermon. At another moment, realizing that a colleague is trying to take advantage of his goodwill, he decides to use calculated emotional force. He reduces access, limits conversations, changes his tone. The result is immediate. The person reorganizes themselves. It's as if the entire environment responds to his new energy. He realizes that avoiding being hated doesn't mean pleasing everyone, but acting firmly without humiliating, and that a man who knows when to say no creates his own loyal armies, not because he inspires love, but because he inspires respect. Each small limit imposed strengthens his inner virtue, his posture, and his perception of value. Now, instead of trying to fit into every mold, he creates his own. The transition is complete when he realizes that respect isn't earned through explanations, but through memorable actions. He stops explaining himself so much, stops asking permission to exist, stops negotiating his own dignity. Constant adaptability helps him adjust his posture without betraying his essence. He understands that those who try to be loved by everyone end up being loved by no one, and worse, not respected by themselves. Respect is born when the other person realizes that your emotions don't control you, that you make decisions based on real human nature, and that you can be kind, but never predictable. This mix creates a presence that few can ignore. He begins to notice that people talk to him differently, approach him differently, even praise him for qualities they didn't even notice before. And this new presence prepares him for the next understanding, the brutal difference between the nice guy and the dominant one, something that will sharpen his perception of power like never before. He realizes there's a chasm between the nice guy and the dominant guy, and that this chasm has nothing to do with morality, but with strategy. The nice guy says yes for fear of losing approval. The dominant guy says no because he understands that limits are protection. The nice guy over-explains. The dominant guy understands that justifications are expensive and should only be used when truly necessary. Machiavelli already warned that decisions based on real human nature are more effective than attempts to please. And when he observes his own history, he realizes how many times he was nice, believing that this built connection. It didn't. It built too much accessibility, unprotected vulnerability. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, shows that apparent kindness without structure becomes a tool for manipulators. He understands that the dominant guy isn't harsh, of course. He isn't aggressive. He's objective. He isn't selfish. He's aware of his own worth. And this difference begins to change everything in his way of acting. The nice guy avoids conflict. The dominant one avoids waste. While the nice guy tries to convince, explain, and argue, the dominant one observes, calculates, and nips things in the bud. He realizes that the nice guy lives in fear of being hated, while the dominant one focuses on avoiding being hated for real reasons, maintaining a firm stance without humiliating. The nice guy seeks love, the dominant one seeks respect, and finds both when necessary. He begins to apply small, practical changes. When someone tries to pressure him into taking on more tasks, he responds, "That doesn't work for me." End of story. No drama. When someone tries to manipulate emotions for advantage, he doesn't play the game. He simply distances himself. This is the calculated use of emotional force. He realizes that loyal armies of his own form when people understand that you are not an easy option. And while the nice guy tries to be predictable to please, the dominant one uses constant adaptability to be strategic. It is in this contrast that true power is born. The most cruel and most liberating difference is that the nice guy acts out of fear, while the dominant one acts out of self-awareness. The nice guy seeks validation before acting. The dominant one seeks consistency with their own principles. The nice guy tolerates, accepts, swallows hard. The dominant one interrupts patterns, cuts toxic relationships, and acts without asking permission. They realize that the key question that separates the two is simple. Does this increase my influence? If the answer is no, the dominant one doesn't do it. They don't talk, they don't negotiate, they don't prolong. It's virtue applied to everyday life. And this posture creates presence. A presence that doesn't shout, doesn't force, doesn't beg. It simply exists firmly. They realize that by ceasing to be nice, they don't become cruel, they become whole. And this integrity prepares them to understand something even deeper. Most people talk a lot and act little, and this destroys their reputation without them realizing it. They are ready to see what Machiavelli always tried to teach about action and silence. He realizes that most people destroy their own credibility without noticing, simply because they talk too much. They talk about what they're going to do. They talk about the changes they've promised themselves. They talk about the goals they'll start on Monday. And the more they talk, the less they do. Machiavelli observed that in the game of power, a word is a promise. Action is the guarantee. And whoever promises too much without delivering creates a reputation for weakness. It's like a dog that barks but doesn't bite. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, shows that those who act little lose authority, regardless of their intentions. He remembers how many times he warned that he would change his stance, be firmer, set limits, and didn't. This opened doors to being ignored, surpassed, and even manipulated. The end justifies the means when the means is protecting one's word, and he understands that talking is ego, acting is virtue, and virtue is what moves the real world. He decides to reverse the logic. He starts talking less and observing more. When someone tries to pressure him emotionally instead of making a speech, he simply says, "I understand, but I won't do it." And he keeps his word. When he promises something at work, he delivers, even if silently. This simple movement begins to have an impact. He realizes that those who act little need long speeches. Those who act a lot need few words. Your own loyal armies are formed when people realize that you do what you say, and that you don't say everything you do. He also realizes that when he speaks less, his unpredictability increases. And with unpredictability comes respect. Machiavelli explained that the calculated use of force, including verbal force, creates an aura that educates everyone around. He realizes that speaking little is not coldness, it's strategy. It's not arrogance, it's preservation. It's not detachment, it's silent power. The impact is so great that he begins to notice changes even in the tone of the people around him. Before, they asked for favors as if it were an obligation. Now, they ask carefully. Before, they underestimated his decisions. Now, they ask his opinion. Before, they ignored his limits. Now, they respect them. All this because his posture has become guided not by anxiety to please, but by decisions based on real human nature. He realizes that, in the game of power, action is the greatest tool for constant adaptability. It is what differentiates those who control the narrative from those who are controlled by it. And the more he acts, the more he realizes that words are better when used as rare instruments, precise, strategic, calculated. He no longer needs to promise change. He is the change. And this opens the way to another essential Machiavellian principle, the demarcation of power through memorable actions, actions that speak so loudly that they silence any argument. He discovers almost by accident that a single firm action has more impact than 100 explanations. A well-executed decision educates everyone around him without him needing to raise his voice. Machiavelli already warned that the calculated use of force works because it cuts doubt at the root, while timid actions fuel uncertainty. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, shows that people pay more attention to what you do than to what you say. And when he realizes this, his whole life changes. By imposing a clear limit, such as not immediately responding to abusive messages or refusing an unfair request without justification, he creates a landmark, a boundary. And boundaries in the psychological game are symbolic markers of authority. He understands that memorable actions don't need to be grandiose. They need to be unequivocal. They need to show virtù, firmness, and self-awareness. It is this type of action that people remember, and it is this that builds a silent reputation. He begins to notice everyday situations where he could apply this principle. When a colleague at work tries to get ahead of him, instead of confronting him verbally, he changes the dynamic. He documents everything, formalizes decisions, and prevents loopholes. This simple attitude creates a huge psychological impact. It shows that he is not someone who can be pushed aside. Another example, when a friend always cancels meetings at the last minute, he doesn't complain. He simply stops adjusting his schedule to please them. Strategic absence creates value. He discovers that often silence is more memorable than long conversations. Machiavelli knew this when he stated that well-placed actions are remembered more than frequent actions. And little by little, he sees his behavior shaping perceptions. His own loyal armies begin to form not out of fear, but out of clarity. People understand. With him, there is structure, and those who have structure are never treated as accessories. Over time, he learns that asserting power isn't about being tough, it's about being uncontested. A precise action, taken at the right moment, creates a domino effect that changes how everyone around him behaves. He realizes that when he uses constant adaptability, he knows exactly when to appear and when to disappear. Strategic disappearance, that silent retreat when someone tries to test his limits, becomes one of his strongest tools. Absence invades perception more deeply than constant presence. This is pure Machiavelli, controlling the narrative not only by what is shown, but by what is withdrawn. And as he strengthens this skill, he begins to notice something even deeper, that reputation is an invisible weapon, a weapon that, when well constructed, means he doesn't even need to act to be respected. And it is precisely this weapon that will lead him to the next understanding, perception as a central tool of power. He begins to understand that in the game of power, what others believe you are matters more than what you truly are. Machiavelli said that the appearance of virtue can be worth more than virtue itself, especially when politics guided by reality, not ideals, defines human behavior. Perception is currency, and whoever controls this currency has a silent but brutal advantage. He realizes that his previous image, always available, always understanding, always saying yes, created the perception of someone fragile, malleable, easy to manipulate. Reality didn't matter. Perception ruled. This is where he discovers that virtù is not just inner strength, but the ability to shape how the world sees him. He realizes that even his pauses, his silences, and his facial expressions send signals. And by adjusting these signals, he changes his narrative. A simple no, said calmly, creates more impact than 1,000 speeches. He discovers that perception is not aesthetics, it is strategy. He begins to experiment with this invisible weapon in everyday life. Instead of trying to explain his change in behavior, he lets people feel it. He doesn't say, "I'm more assertive now." He simply is. This decision, based on real human nature, has an immediate effect. People begin to approach him more carefully, to measure their words, to consider his opinions more seriously. He realizes that unpredictability creates respect, and respect builds loyal armies of its own. He understands that perception is shaped not only by what he does, but by what he doesn't do. For example, when he stops participating in pointless conversations, his absence creates authority. When he stops justifying trivial decisions, his stance is seen as conviction. It's a calculated use of psychological force. He realizes that avoiding being hated doesn't mean being transparent all the time. It means being strategic in what he reveals. And this strategy redefines his presence. Over time, he understands that perception is like a lens. It distorts, amplifies, or diminishes depending on who holds it. And whoever learns to hold that lens for themselves masters the game. He begins to shape his tone of voice, his way of looking, even the environments in which he appears. He avoids places where his energy is drained and seeks environments where his image grows. This is constant adaptability in its most refined form. He realizes that reputation is not built on intention, it's built on details, and that the end justifies the means when the end is to protect his presence and his value. Machiavelli taught that whoever shapes the narrative shapes power. He now lives this daily. Every gesture, every choice, every silence shapes how others perceive him. And it is this sharp and intentional perception that prepares him for the next natural step in the strategy, learning to shape the narrative before others do it for him, something even deeper and more transformative. He realizes that strategic image doesn't arise by chance. It arises from intention. And when Machiavelli spoke about the importance of the appearance of virtue, he wasn't referring to superficial pretense, but to the understanding that human beings respond first to what they see and feel, not to what is objectively true. Politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands that he learn to control this. He begins to invest in simple elements that shape perception: a firmer posture, a more measured tone of voice, a direct gaze without aggression. He realizes that environments matter. When surrounded by chaotic people, his image is diluted. When in environments of value, his social standing grows. He discovers that even the way he dresses communicates strength or weakness. He becomes intentional. He adopts a cleaner, more objective style that translates virtue without exaggeration. The image ceases to be aesthetic and becomes strategic. He begins to understand why strong leaders always seem in control. They build that impression. To test this construct, he begins experimenting with micro-adjustments in his daily life. In conversations, he speaks less, listens more, and only intervenes when he has something truly relevant. This makes his words carry weight. He replaces long explanations with short sentences and suddenly realizes that no one interrupts him anymore. He also controls his digital presence. He publishes less, but with more intention. He comments less, but with more depth. He avoids unnecessary controversies because he understands that avoiding being hated doesn't mean being neutral, but strategic. He discovers that a strategic image is built on silence, consistency, and clarity, and that the calculated use of force refers not only to harsh actions, but also to emotional control. When he masters his own expression, his body begins to send signals of authority that he doesn't even realize. Machiavelli knew this when he stated that people treat you the way you have trained them. He now trains the world to see him with respect. As he delves deeper into this process, he understands that simply having a presence isn't enough. He needs to project it. He begins frequenting environments where his image grows naturally, such as more professional spaces, communities of strategic individuals, and groups with a growth mindset, not a chaotic one. Each environment shapes perception. He realizes that reputation is a long-term investment, just like having his own loyal armies, and that constant adaptability is essential to adjusting his image to the context without losing his essence. At work, he adopts a firm posture. At home, he maintains authority with ease. In negotiations, he projects absolute emotional control, all intentional, nothing random. He understands that building a strategic image is a continuous process, a work that never ends. And the more he grows in this process, the more he realizes that controlling his image is only half the game. The other half, even more powerful, is learning to shape the narrative before anyone else does. He realizes that, in the game of power, history doesn't belong to whoever is right. It belongs to whoever tells the story first. Machiavelli already knew this when he stated that reputation is a strategic construct, not a reflection of truth. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, makes it clear that narrative shapes perception, and perception shapes the behavior of those around us. He understands that the same action can seem like leadership or arrogance, depending on who tells the story. Silence can seem like wisdom or weakness. A no can seem like posture or rudeness. And, for a long time, he let other people define these interpretations, precisely because he didn't know how to occupy this narrative space. Now he learns that virtue also includes the ability to control interpretation before it even forms. He discovers that narrative is a silent weapon, and whoever gets there first governs the reading of the facts. He begins to observe how this manifests in everyday life. When he makes a firm decision at work, he quickly realizes that if he doesn't explain his intentions, someone else will explain them for him, and not necessarily in his favor. So instead of waiting for opinions to form, he shapes the context. He communicates clearly, even using few words, and always with purpose, not justification. It's a calculated use of verbal force. He realizes that when he takes a stand first, he creates a psychological anchor that influences how everyone interprets what comes next. This is pure Machiavelli. Whoever controls the framing controls the conflict. He also applies this to personal relationships. When he decides to distance himself from someone, he doesn't say, "I need space," but "I'm focusing on my priorities now." The narrative changes everything. He understands that avoiding being hated doesn't mean being completely transparent, but being strategically clear, and this clarity prevents others from manipulating his reputation. The most powerful aspect, however, is when he learns to transform attacks into fuel for his own narrative. When someone tries to criticize him unfairly, he doesn't respond defensively. That would be playing into the other person's game. Instead, he raises the level. "Thank you for your opinion. Now, let's get to the facts." Firm, serene, unquestionable. This stance weakens the criticism, and his reputation gains authority. Machiavelli taught that the end justifies the means when the end is to maintain one's position in the public eye, and he finally understands this in practice. He realizes that shaping the narrative is not manipulation, it's self-protection in a world where silence is lost. And the more he masters this skill, the more he realizes that real power lies not in explaining oneself, but in directing the story. This skill opens the way to the next truth, perhaps the most profound of all. In the end, the most dangerous power is the power of silence. He finally realizes that true power never makes noise. It takes effect. Machiavelli always hinted at this by showing that effective rulers don't announce their intentions. They simply execute them. Politics guided by reality, not ideals, reveals that the most dangerous don't need to show themselves because their presence already creates an impact. He observes that truly influential people speak less, but everything they say carries weight. They walk slowly, but nothing about them conveys hesitation. They make decisions calmly, but never weakly. This silence is not absence, it's strategy. It's the calculated use of emotional and behavioral force. He realizes that when he stops reacting impulsively, his energy changes. When he no longer feels the need to prove anything, his posture changes. When he masters his own narrative with virtu and constant adaptability, the world begins to treat him differently. He discovers that silent power doesn't convince, it molds, effortlessly, without shouting, without despair. He begins to experience this power in everyday life. When someone provokes him, he doesn't react. He observes. When someone tries to manipulate him, he doesn't explain himself. He retreats. When someone tries to steal his spotlight, he doesn't fight. He simply changes his strategy, and suddenly the dynamic reverses. The people who previously underestimated him begin to measure their words. Those who abused his tolerance now tread more carefully. The opportunists, accustomed to exploiting his kindness, realize that there is now an invisible barrier and that overcoming it will not be so simple. It's as if he has built his own loyal armies within himself, emotional strength, serenity, self-control. He finally understands the Machiavellian phrase that always sounded so enigmatic. It is better to be feared than loved, provided one avoids being hated. The fear here is not dread, it's respect. It's that silent feeling that there is someone unshakable there. And this impact opens a new vision of who he is becoming. Over time, he comes to see the world as a psychological arena, a daily war of perceptions, postures, intentions, and strategies. He understands that true power is daily, mundane, almost invisible. It has no fiery speeches, no grand promises, no audience. It has consistency. It has decisions based on real human nature. It has moments of silence that speak louder than any argument. He realizes that the war is not against people, but against his old patterns, against the predictable nice guy, against the talker who doesn't act, against the man who expected recognition. Now he moves with precision, economy, and psychological maturity. Is he hunter or prey? For him, this question ceases to be theoretical and becomes visceral. The arena demands choice. And when he finally finds himself able to face the world without fear, he understands that he is ready for something greater, something that can only be built when silence becomes his sharpest weapon. Ultimately, everything you've seen here isn't just pretty theory. It's psychological survival. The world doesn't reward those who wait, those who over-explain, or those who surrender their emotional strength to others. It rewards those who learn to take a stand. Those who understand Machiavelli not as a villain, but as someone who described exactly the game you play every day and have been losing without realizing it. Now the question is straightforward. What are you going to do with this knowledge? Will you continue being the strategic nice guy that everyone uses and discards? Will you continue expecting reciprocity from those who only show up when they need something? Or will you finally take a stand, set boundaries, shape the narrative, and live with the strength you've always had but never used? And most importantly, what will be your first memorable action? Maybe it's saying a no you've put off for years. Maybe it's breaking a toxic cycle. Maybe it's just talking less and acting more, but something needs to start today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Today. The arena doesn't wait. If this video made you see something that was right in front of your eyes and you never noticed it before, then subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications. Here, you'll learn exactly what no one taught you about psychological power, presence, and human strategy. Because in the real world, Those who don't understand the game become pawns in the game.